remember my first visit home at Thanksgiving after I'd gone away to college for my freshman year. It was different. It was different. It still looked like home. The same people were there, my aunt, my cousins, my grandma, a few friends from high school were still hanging around, or they were on their own break from their schools. Everyone was basically living the same life that they had been, and everything about home was still good. It wasn't like one of those bad, it was different. It was just different. And I remember like walking in the house and walking in my room and feeling kind of weird and unsettled, and like things were familiar, but they were also unfamiliar. It still felt like home, but it just didn't fit the same anymore. And that's because even though I hadn't realized it, I had changed. I had changed because of my new experience of going to college and meeting new people and having new experiences. And you know what? That happens to the best of us, doesn't it? We get new experiences and they change us, even if it's just incrementally, because change is a natural part of life. It is built into the fabric of our existence. And perhaps that's why travel appeals to some of us, because we seek those new experiences and we want to be changed by them, and we look forward to those experiences, those changes, and when we return home, we bring it all back with us, becoming in some ways just a little bit of a new person. Now, when we talk about faith, we often also use words that describe traveling. We're on a faith journey, right? Y'all have heard that before. We're on a faith journey, and while we don't use the word that often anymore, pilgrimage is still a part of our faith genetic code, and it's still kind of built in how we see faith. And what happens when we travel? We change. We experience growth. And when we're talking about our faith journey, the same thing occurs. Friends, if our faith never changes, and we are never changed by our faith, if the example of Jesus does nothing for us as we try and model our lives and our behavior after his, we're doing something wrong. Now, I don't say that up here that often. I don't get into right and wrong when it comes to faith, but faith ought to be transformational for us. So if that is not happening somewhere, somehow, at some point in our lives, even in small ways, we might want to ask ourselves what we're doing, that our faith is not stretching us and changing us and making us grow. Let's hear this morning from John 15. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me, you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. Because my Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends. I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commandments so that you may love one another. So that you may... Now, we love a good gardening story, don't we? Now, I know some of us here are a little bit better gardeners than others. Now, y'all already know, if you've heard me talk before about gardening, that I kill everything in my house but people. And there's not really a guarantee for that most days, but so far. It is a plant hospice at my house, a slow decline to certain death for anything that comes home in a pot from Home Depot. They tremble at the door. But for Jesus, a good gardening metaphor, that is where it's at. And this one serves us well even after all these years. So we're going to pretend that my thumbs are greener than they are as we talk about this gardening metaphor. In this moment, in this text, I know it was long. There was a lot of abide in me, and I in you, and in me, and in you, and abide, 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 right? But in this moment, in John chapters 14 through 17, y'all are welcome to go home and read all 3 chapters. Didn't think I needed to do that for you this morning. You're welcome. But this is what we call his farewell discourse. It is the last great I am teaching of Jesus. And here's the thing. If you know that you are in your last moments with the people that you love, what are you going to share with them? The things that you value the most, the things that are most important to you, the things that are heaviest on your heart and your mind. You are not going to waste words talking about unimportant stuff. So Jesus tells them things like, I'm leaving, but don't be afraid. And don't let your hearts be troubled. It's going to be okay, because we're still connected and still going to be connected in important ways. And what does he use to illustrate this connection that's going to continue? This beautiful image of mutual dependence. I rely on you, and you rely on me. We are intimately connected. It's deeply relational, and it's how the disciples can understand their lives, their identity, and their ministry now and in the future. Even if Jesus is not physically present with them any longer, he is still present with them in ways that matter. And it means also that each one of the disciples cannot exist without the other. And this root system that is created by this image of the vine anchors them to one another and to Jesus. Now, there's a New Testament professor and scholar and preaching professor, Sandra O'Day, and she asked in one of her books, what does it mean for the church to live as if the branches of Christ, the vine, what would church look like if it embraced this model for corporate life? If we indeed lived like we are intimately connected with one another each and every day, if we truly saw ourselves as intimately connected with one another and with our neighbors in the way that Jesus teaches the disciples that they are, how would this change what it means to be church? Now, our culture teaches us that we value independence and self-reliance above everything else. I mean, you gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You gotta go it alone. You gotta have rugged individualism. That is the American way. But friends, that rugged individualism, that is a myth that has saturated all areas of our society. It's not true. It's a myth. None of us do a single thing without the help of others. Now, I know folks work hard. I know folks accomplish great things. I know sometimes folks have a hard road to get where they're at, but I promise you, I guarantee you, somewhere in their life, they have had help from somebody. None of us do a single thing without the others. And it's simply just not what Jesus teaches on how we should live our lives and how we should nurture the relationships that we have, to just go it alone. That's not who Jesus is. Jesus teaches us here and in other texts how interdependence is needed for true community. True community, it's what happens when we're willing to be dependent on one another. It's what happens when we love our neighbor. It's what happens when we care for those outside of our normal closed circles that we involve ourselves with. It is what happens. Mutual dependence is what happens when we actually abide in Jesus. So let's talk about abide, because that's not a word that we throw around. It's kind of a fancy word. It does kind of roll off the tongue, abide. We don't really use it in everyday conversation, right? So what's it mean, abide? To stay or remain. Jesus is saying, stay in me. Continue in me. And he doesn't stop there. He goes on to say, when you live like this, you will also love your neighbor like I have loved you. Abide, mutual dependence. To love like this, to love like Jesus, it takes real strength. It takes intentionality. It takes courage and determination, because our society is not going to let us do this easily. Our culture is going to continually reinforce to us that we need to put ourselves first, that we need to hoard our resources, that we need to close off and exclude and protect ourselves from others. And that is contrary, friends, to what Jesus teaches in a whole lot of biblical texts, including this one. Now, here's the catch to all of this abiding and all of this mutual dependence and all of this loving one another and loving Jesus and loving our neighbors and love, 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 love. There is a catch. Jesus is pretty clear that if those branches don't bear fruit, what happens? They're pruned. They die. If that sounds harsh, it's because it is. Now, I am not suggesting for any 1 second that Jesus is in heaven with God at his side, just waiting for us to move up and being like, there you go, get those clippers out. Like, that is not what I'm saying. This isn't judgment as much as it is guidance, as much as it is a reminder to be who we are meant to be. Because what is the opposite of growth? Shrinkage, withering. If we choose to not go outside of our carefully curated and constructed lives, if we choose to not learn from other people, if we choose individuality over community, self-reliance over interdependence, we are, in a sense, choosing death. Now, maybe it's a death of our faith. Maybe it's a death of our relationships. Maybe it's a sacrifice of our growth and our curiosity. Maybe it's the death of love in our heart and ability, a death of compassion and generosity. Because what happens to a vine when the dead branches are removed from it? Y'all are gardeners, I know, I'm looking at some of you. What happens to a plant when you prune away all the dead stuff? It grows. That maybe not in my house, but I bet it does at yours. It grows. It flourishes with new life. When we look at ourselves, honestly, and not overly critically, but with a critical eye, and we remove the bits and pieces of ourselves internally that prevent us from living and abiding in Jesus, what happens? We flourish. We grow spiritually and emotionally when we abide in Jesus and in one another, and Jesus in us. We are back to that mutual dependence, that full circle of Christian relationship that says, I rely on you, you rely on me, we are part of one another, and that is an essential component of our community. That's what it means when we say church is like family. When we say we want to be part of a church family, a church community, it means we care for one another. Rick Steves suggests that to travel means that we see that everyone is a child of God. And when you're traveling, you get to know the family. I love that idea of travel as like a family reunion, right? Wherever you go, whatever you're doing, whoever you're with, you are engaging with someone who is a child of God. And so therefore, they are part of the same family as you and me. To abide in one another means we travel outside of our own structured lives, our own prejudices, our own preconceived notions about people. To abide in one another means we take a little bit of this person and a little bit of that person and a little bit of you and a little bit of me, and we put it all together and create something new. To abide in one another is a spiritual act that requires intentionality to live like Jesus taught us. And when we return home, things might feel a little bit different. We will be changed by those travels. Home won't feel quite the same as it did before we left, but far away or close to home, we are engaging in a spiritual act which puts us on the journey of love to which God calls each and every one of us. Amen. I invite you all to pray with me this morning. Holy God, may we hear your voice in the stillness of the night. In the busyness of day, you call us and we respond, here I am. May we follow you. And may we love as you love. Holy One, through all the difficulties that can come in life, make us steady, your hands holding strong the fragile and weak. May we love as you love. Compassionate One, give us the desire and courage to love you with our everything and love our neighbors and even our enemies, even though it's hard, as ourselves. May we love as you love. Gracious God, may the fruits of our lives be food for the hungry, bread and clothing, shelter and fire and water and word. May we love as you love. God of justice, remove the barriers of our lives that keep us from one another, barriers we construct based on skin color or religion or gender or sexuality and politics. May we hear and follow graciously. May we love as you love. Loving God, take this day, our fears and worries, our distractions, and turn them all into grace and mercy. God, may we love as you love. Amen.